Good afternoon. Today is May 24th, 2010, which is one day after my son's 21st birthday. He currently is doing the camera work, but he will be in the video. And we're going to be having a conversation with my dad, Joseph Levine. And shortly, hopefully, will be joining us my daughter, Heather Brianna. And we can talk about anything, but I was really hoping, Dad, today, at least to start with, to focus on something different than we did the first time. And that is to talk about what happened in the early period and going forward in your business. And so what I was hoping to do was to kind of start by, what maybe we'll interrupt the war years, but, if you want to talk about education you got in college and then what you were thinking of doing and then after the war, what happened is kind of what I'm interested in.
Can we...
Okay, so Brianna, we gave a little introduction, and this is my daughter, Heather Brianna, who just finished her second year of law school at American University, the Washington College of Law?
That's correct.
Okay, and maybe she'll tell us a little bit about that.
Thank you.
And again, once behind the camera is Jonathan, who just finished his second year of college. All right, so as what I was saying, Brianna, is I'd like to focus a little bit more today. We were talking last time a little bit about the war years, but I'd like to talk about my father's experience in starting business and telling us how that all developed. But Dad, can you just start with your education a little bit and then we'll go after the war?
That for you.
When I went off to college, it was at the University of Pennsylvania, and which is in the Philadelphia area. And the experience I remember most was the first day going there. My father drove me to the train station in Newark and insisted on giving me a lecture on how to behave in college all the way through the train station, including getting on the train. And he was a veteran of traveling to New York all the time at the last minute and knew when to get off the train, even though it was maybe even moving a little bit. But he got so wrapped up in his speech about how to behave myself and all the rest of the things a father feels he has to be sure his kid is aware of, that he stayed on the train until we were going about 30 miles an hour. And he wound up going to Philly. And when I got to Trenton, I suddenly realized that he was standing in the aisle and I was seated in the only car, in the only seat that was vacant. So I changed places, and from Trenton to Philly, he actually had a seat, and he did say goodbye.
But he left Grandma Fanny behind.
Grandma Fanny was sitting in the car all that time.
Oh my God!
And
for how many hours?
I think it was about 3. It only takes about 40 minutes to get to Trenton from Newark. So we had to catch the next train back.
She must have been upset. Can you imagine?
Well, I think she knew what had happened. I mean, she wasn't worried if he fell off the tracks or something. But I went to Penn and it was a complete disappointment. I wanted an engineering school. And at that time, the only thing that Penn had was their had the town scientific school, which was the birthplace of the computer age, which is something called ENIVAC or UNIVAC, which was the first computer for business purposes.
Okay.
And when I told the prof I was leaving to go to an engineering school, and I had already picked out Michigan, he said, "Why?" And I said, "Well, I have a bigger erector set in my cellar than you do." And he wasn't impressed with that remark, but he did wish me luck. Anyway, the only comment from my father was that the tuition, he knew that the tuition at Michigan was half of what it was at Penn. And so he was only worried about the cost of the train ride, which turned out to be practically nothing. For about $30, I could go from Summit, New Jersey to Detroit.
Was there a train that went? How
Well,
did it go?
what
You
happened
go to New York
is
and then you go to Detroit?
the Delaware, Lackawanna, and Western started in Hoboken, went through all the little stations along the way: East Orange, South Orange, West Orange, Summit, Chatham, Madison, Morristown, all the way diagonally across New York State to Buffalo. And then at 2:30 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, they met the 20th Century Limited, which came out of New York City via New York Central Railroad. And in those days, the train, they didn't wait for anybody. If you weren't on the train, they were gone. It was a business train, and they were supposed to arrive in Chicago like 12 noon. And they were known for their track record being excellent. And if you bought a certain specified ticket in New York Central, if you were 5 minutes late, you got $5. If you were 10 minutes late, you got $10. The most that they ever were.
That was an incentive.
That was some incentive. I mean, this train, when they said all aboard, you better have your butt in the seat.
But $5 is like $500 now. So, yeah.
Well, not quite.
That was an incentive.
But quite frankly, what happened at engineering was that, as you know, I was pretty handy with it.
Can we interrupt this for just 1 second? Can you put us on?
I wanted to say that my experience at Penn only reinforced the idea that I wanted to go to school which had more technical things that I was interested in. And from in the local area, there was Stevens University in Hoboken. And so my father says, why don't you just go to Hoboken? I said, well, all they got is engineering. There's nothing, you either take engineering or you don't take anything else. Whereas at Michigan, there are other things to take. They had a business school, they had an art school.
Did you take other classes besides engineering classes?
Oh yeah, definitely so. And in fact, that was a major attraction for me. By the time that I got into, was a senior, I was taking classes in economics and business. I'd had a lot of technical courses. My courses ran from 8 to noon, an hour off for lunch, and engineering schools had classes in the afternoon, laboratories, where when you took up chemistry, you performed experiments, or you visited some laboratory which was developing equipment to make better shingles, for example, for a house. Because in those days, you mostly had wooden shingles on the house. So Michigan was a fabulous school. They had dormitories for the freshman class. If you were in the sophomore class and up, you lived in private homes, which had 4 or 5 kids in it. Usually weren't mixed. In fact, I don't know of any one that was mixed. That is, in terms of girls and boys. The other part of Michigan was that, which was excellent, was the fact that they weren't pushing you if you were in engineering to be the world's best engineering student, because maybe 90% of the kids that joined the class did stay through in engineering courses. But there were a few kids who wanted to start out in engineering and felt they made a mistake and wanted to shift, and took anything from economics to philosophy. So there was a small group in that sense. But I think primarily the thing I liked best about it,
besides the bridge?
What's the bridge story?
I mean, we used to play bridge.
Oh, playing bridge. Okay.
Play bridge.
I'm thinking an actual bridge.
No. We
Cars.
were playing bridge at least 8 hours a week.
It was like a non-stop.
This was a non-stop thing. By the way, you have a rabbit running through your yard. Just by the tree, Jonathan.
Yeah.
Slightly to the left. His ears are stuck up. He just turned towards
He's
us.
hiding in the grass. There he is.
The school was very flexible. In the sense that there was no question that the prof was in charge, but at the same time, he was accessible. He was somebody you could talk to after the class for as long as you wanted to be there. And
just like they say it's supposed to be at these fancy colleges, but never is.
This is, in that sense, it was fabulous. For example, I took an astronomy course, and the guy that was the head of it was a fellow by the name of Timoshenko, and
Sounds
he probably was, for all I know. He had become famous because he was involved in some kind of study of the orbit of all the planets, and how the various orbits of the planet, one planet, the gravity that is the orientation of the Earth going through the atmosphere. The sun is, of course, revolving around, or you're revolving around it, and but so is the moon and so are stars and everything else like that. And he had done a lot of investigative studies, which were the basis of astronomy courses. So he was no slouch. He was, a pro in the field.
Right.
And you felt like when you were talking to him that you were only scratching the surface with the things that he knew. I mean, to me, that's what made Michigan great. Also the social life. It was very open. All the girls lived in private homes, except in their freshman year, and there were every Saturday night there was a dance going on in what do they call them in colleges now?
Mixer.
It's a mixer, but what I meant is
Formal?
no, it's
Prom.
it's informal. What I'm trying to get across is that there was music available with an orchestra, and the orchestra was composed of students and also professors. And they had these recreation centers, one for the boys, one for the girls, where you could go in and they had a cafeteria. You could play pool. There was an area where you could play tennis in the area, all this type of thing. So in a sense, you almost felt like you were at home. Everything was easy to get at. No crazy requirement that you had to be dressed in a certain way with a tie and jacket on.
Is that what your dad had told you?
No, my dad had no idea what college was. The only time he ever visited me with my mother was when I graduated.
Oh, okay.
Otherwise, he never visited me. But when I got to be a senior, I was taking classes in economics, taking classes in business administration, that type of thing. I'd already completed all the requirements of engineering.
How many
I went to
courses
school.
How many courses have you taken this semester? I know you said in college, in high school, you took like more than anybody had ever taken in summer high school.
And in Michigan, probably took as much as in my senior year.
Yeah.
Was the first time that I, in the second semester of my senior year, I didn't take any courses after 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Up to that point, I went to school
All day. Wow.
And
So you were taking like 5, 6, 7 classes? Or?
Oh, sure. 4 individual classes. The only thing that was more than an hour was when you were doing chemistry.
Yeah.
You had laboratories there. Okay?
How did you have time to do? Did they have assignments for you after class?
Sure.
How did you have time to get them done?
But difficult.
Oh, okay.
But there was still time for bridge
There was still time for bridge
and the dances.
and dances. If you look at the pictures there's a bunch of pictures in the album of the various girls I went out with through the years. Anyway, I don't think I was a ladies' man by any stretch of the imagination. But
Leon always credits you. He said that you saved him from some situation where he was going to get married to a girl, and took him aside and you gave him some brotherly advice, and you decided to better it against it. I don't remember what it was, but he really was genuinely grateful to you. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah, he was wrapped up with one girl, quite seriously.
Leo? Grandma's brother?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. He was almost married to somebody else, and you thought something different about it. And I can tell you that, just a few years ago, he told me for the umpteenth time how much that meant to him. That you would, I don't know why. I don't know why.
We had a good relationship, and I just felt that he had spent so much time with this one girl. There really was two girls in this world, or maybe even three or four. But he arrived at a point where he was listening. That. And as you go along in life, you find out that some of your parents occasionally know something.
But you're like a brother.
Yeah, you weren't his.
I was exactly. I'm more brother than him.
But I think probably he couldn't get that kind of advice from his parents because that wasn't. They couldn't interact with him in that way anyway.
No.
Even if
it was a different makeup.
Yeah, that wasn't how they would interact at all. In those days, that's not how the parents were, especially with that, Anyway, that's interesting.
But anyway, getting out of school was rather interesting. There were like
So what year did you enter Michigan? What year did you enter Penn? When did you enter Michigan? When did you graduate?
I went to Penn in '37.
Right.
Got out in,
Year
41.
later?
1 year later. And I went 3 years to Michigan, graduated there in 41.
41, yeah.
There were two guys in the whole class that didn't have a job at the end of the year. Both were Jewish fellows. I was one, and Jerry Buttenberg was the other. And he ultimately got a job with an aircraft company. And I took a job with the Department of Defense.
So
in
this
Detroit.
was in June of 41, more or less?
In June of 41.
So how many kids were there in the class, and how many had jobs then? You're talking about in the engineering school.
Oh, it was about 1,500. No,
Well,
about 1,200. About 1,200 students in the overall engineering. That was a big school.
So maybe 300 in a year.
Oh yeah.
So of 300, only 2 didn't have a job, and 2 of them happened to be Jewish.
Right. And
Were
It's
there
almost
other
like the Supreme
Jews?
Court.
I want to know, were there other Jews who did have jobs?
no.
It would be the Supreme Court if 250 of them were Jewish.
So all Jews, I'm just trying to, it's like a Venn diagram, like all Jews had no jobs. And they
Oh,
were
right.
the only students that didn't have jobs.
That's the only students
There-
that I know of in engineering.
There's a
school.
bijection.
Yeah. I'm not
between,
talking about. The interesting thing about that is that I was very friendly with the head of the engineering school, and he was quite concerned that I didn't have a job. And he showed me a letter written to him by a guy in Saginaw, Michigan, and it said by the way, every engineering student had been placed by March of the graduating year, except the two guys, Jerry Mecklenburg and me. He got a job at an aircraft company in Buffalo, New York, and I went to work for the U.S. government, the Defense Department in Detroit.
Who
And
didn't discriminate against you, I guess. So that's good.
And the crazy part about that, hey, look at the Robert.
Jonathan?
going where the grass is greener.
With the wildlife segment of it.
We wanted to get closer to you, Jonathan. That's all.
I wanted to hear the story.
Okay,
But
let's
anyway-
resume this. Sorry.
But anyway, what I wanted to say was that I went for an interview, and they flew me to Maryland, Baltimore, to an engineering house.
Who flew you?
The company.
Which company?
Uh,
Oh, the one that was interviewing.
The guy, right, that was interviewing me.
So they
And-
flew you where? I'm sorry, out to
To
Maryland.
Baltimore.
Gotcha.
Maryland,
Right.
So the crazy part about that is that Jerry and I were exchanging stories about everything that was going on. I didn't graduate first in my class. I think it was first in my class in the amount of hours that I took, in courses. But I certainly was an average student. If I really liked a class, I got a B plus in it. And if I didn't like it, I got a C plus or a B minus or something else like that. I never got excited about my marks. My parents were. They were very upset with me that I didn't get any A's. But when I got into drafting,
But
and that type of
you
thing-
learned something because
yeah.
you're still using it 7 years later.
Anyway, I can remember a letter that the dean showed me from Saginaw, and the guy says specifically in his letter, if there are any Jewish students, we will not hire them. I mean, can you imagine something like that taking
Today.
place today? It's hard to believe. But I decided that I'd heard that the Defense Department was hiring in Detroit. So I put an application in, and I got it. And my first job, I made $2,000 a year.
Which in those days was big bucks.
Well, let me tell you something. The guy I roomed with in Detroit,
You mean in college?
no, after graduation,
Right.
okay, got a 3-year, let's call it a scholarship at General Motors in Saginaw. I don't think it was Saginaw. Someplace in Michigan, and he was taking classes in Detroit, and we both got together and we rented an apartment together. So the first year he was working for Ford, General Motors, and I worked for the Defense Department, and he was making $1,600 a year. I was the highest paid graduate from the University of Michigan because I went to work for the government at $2,000 a year.
Dad, what was the college tuition in those days?
Michigan,
Yeah.
I think it was every bit of, if you were an in-state student, I think it was like $80 a semester. And,
$8 a semester.
well, that was a real attraction to my father.
So for
Michigan-
you,
But
so
how
what was
much
it for
for
you?
out-of-state students?
Well, out-of-state student, we paid about twice as much, 160.
Was that tuition, room, and board, or what is
That's
that?
tuition.
No,
That's
just tuition, Jonathan, not room and board.
$80 a semester in state.
How much did room and board set you back? I'm just curious.
I just want to tell you, I'm $2,000 a year kid. I had this big a breakfast and this big a lunch and this big a supper. Plenty. I would say that I was actually putting $5 a week in the bank. And I really had a good bank account. I had at least $100 at the end of the year.
No, but how much did it cost for room and board at college?
She's adding up the 160 for a semester plus.
I'm just curious how much room and board was. If room and board was more than tuition, or was it less than tuition?
No, it must be more.
Oh, it's more than tuition. Don't think I can remember.
Okay, but it was more.
It's a few $100 or $500 or
Yeah.
semester.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm just trying to.
But still.
I'm just trying to figure out the cost of living.
Yeah.
How much it was.
But I got a job in Michigan, and I became the war started in 41. The U.S. was bombed, and I thought I repeated this for you.
Yeah, I want to skip the war years for the moment, Dad. And
Okay.
I want to go. It may be starting to rain, but if it doesn't start and we're going to have a little bit more time, Jonathan, you want to put it on hold for a second?
And we're back. Now it's the three generations of Levine men.
And Brianna's on the camera.
I'm on the camera.
Okay, so what I'd like to do is bring us up after the war, Dad, and we'll come back to the war another time, but I would like to talk about what you did after the war, and maybe a little bit about meeting my mother, but a lot about starting the business, that you ultimately spent your whole career on.
Well, when I was still single after graduation, and after coming back from the South Pacific, I came home and decided that I hadn't worked for anybody in the industry. I had worked for the Air Force, was taking care of planes and things like that, but I had never had a job in private industry. So, and I thought I needed some experience in that. And at the time, I was living in New York City on Lexington Avenue on 38th Street with Ben Root, whose father owned the men's shop in Summit. And
So you were living in the city on 38th Street?
Yep.
In Manhattan?
In Manhattan. And I walked across town to Penn Station and caught the train every day. And in those days I knew something about trains. And the trains that used to come out of New York City from Grand Central, not from Grand Central, from Penn Station, stopped in all the little towns going all the way to Philadelphia.
That was
They
when
actually,
Penn Station was Penn Station.
yeah,
Before it was Madison Square Garden Station.
yeah, and then during that trip I got off one block where I worked at General Instrument Corporation. And there I was designing record changes, as I said, and other.
Where was
General Instrument was on the main street. I think it's called Frelinghuysen Avenue, going into Elizabeth from Newark.
So you were commuting from Manhattan
From
to,
that,
to
right. And I lived there with a friend of mine, Ben Root. He was an intern at the hospital, New York Hospital, and
So he wasn't in the clothing business. He was a medical doctor. His dad was in the...
His dad was in the clothing business.
I see.
He was a medical doctor, and we lived in the city on 38th Street.
That must have been neat.
Oh, that was great. We went to every play in New York City, and for something like $2, you could go to a Saturday night show, which was sold out, and have stand-up room. In other words, you could see the whole play or the whole show, whatever it was. There wasn't one that we missed.
Hmm?
It's running.
Yes, I know.
It was a great situation,
Yeah.
and he busted it up. We didn't have a fight. He just did things that were very natural. He met a nurse at the hospital where he was interning, and one day he says to me, "You're moving." I said, "Why?" He said, "No," he says, "We're moving." I said, "Why?" He says, "I'm getting married and I need the bed you're sleeping in." And that was the end of my visit to New York City.
How long were you there?
Oh, close to a year.
That has been great to be single in New York and
That was
free white and
fun.
21.
That was the ultimate.
Yeah.
I mean,
It was a great year.
it was a great year. I mean, you even had, in addition to having rabbits, under the second bush in, not where the camera is, but in the background, there's a chipmunk.
Oh, yeah.
He's got his head
Yeah.
sticking out there on the side,
Oh, yeah?
on the right
Yep.
side, right now.
Yep, running.
And now running to the next bush. He's
Okay.
not under, just about to go under the biggest bush there. But, so I had to leave. I had to come back to Jersey. And
That must have been a bummer.
that was a bummer. But I had a good job at General Instrument, and I was a draftsman. In other words, I was designing parts, sitting at a drafting board all day. General Instrument was making record changers, and I was involved in the record changers, and I think I even showed you that I have a patent for which I got $25 from the company. Did I ever tell you that story? You know the little knob that you have on 78 records that you had the spindle in the center. But in the old days, you stack records on the top. You could put 6, 8 records on the top, and there was a spindle. And in order to drop a record, you had to turn that spindle so that if you have two cylinders lined up and one's not in line with the other one, okay, you're going to tear a hole in it. So I even have a patent on that. And I worked for General Instrument for 18 months in Lisbon.
When we're doing historical pricing, what was the rent? What was your rent in Midtown? In 45.
I would say that we were paying something like $100 a month. And we had a three bedroom
Those
apartment,
3 bedroom.
2 bedroom. Excuse me. We had a bedroom with 2 beds, but a living room and a kitchen, and also a shower, bathroom, obviously.
So it was a one-bedroom,
Yeah, it was a single bedroom, but it was like.
but it had 2 other rooms. Though.
It had 2 other rooms, a living room and a dining room,
Right.
in addition to a small kitchen.
Right.
So, I don't know. I put it in these terms.
Actually, let me interrupt you. Just the $100 a month. That was your share. Or that was the total.
No, that was the total.
And
In
what
fact,
and
they-
what were you?
in
And
fact-
so your share was $50. presumably.
$50.
And what was the and what was your salary at that point?
Is that when you're making 2,000 a year?
Yeah, I was making 2,000 a year.
No, I thought 2,000 a year, Dad, was when you graduated Michigan.
Yeah.
This
no,
is
no,
this
no.
is this was
Oh,
this
okay.
was
It was
that
more
was in
than that.
41. This is now in 45,
Yeah.
46
Oh, okay.
in New York City.
It was much more than that.
Oh,
also.
oh, okay.
If I left you with that impression.
So it
So
might have
there's
been
a-
might have been 4 or 5,000 a year or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Oh, okay.
So rent was a small portion of the salary at that point.
I was thinking that if you were making $2,000, so that rent was, you know, like a quarter of your.
It was a
of your
pretty
income.
significant thing. No, I was making a few bucks more than
Okay.
So anyway, you were at General Instrument. It was in Frelinghuyser
that.
Avenue.
Frelinghuysen Avenue.
Frelinghuyser Avenue.
And actually, that plant used to be part of a General Motors plant. It was tremendous. The building is a very, very long building. I would say it went from that street to the other side of that house easily.
Is it
And
still
then-
there?
Sure. That,
Maybe sometime you have to take me by there and to see it. I'd like to see it.
I'd be glad to.
Yeah.
You know how to get to New Jersey?
I'll get to your place and then you can take me there. Vic.
Okay.
We'll go on a little tour.
Anyway, what am I trying to go back to?
Yeah, how you went from General Instrument and then going forward. You were single. You were in New York. Now you have to move back. Did you move back with your parents, or what did you do?
Trying to think what happened.
After Ben Rube got married.
Ben Luke got married. I think I was home again.
Yeah.
And I also had a car. First car I had was a Plymouth sedan, used. In fact, I think in the pictures I gave you, there's a picture of it.
Right.
And as I said to you, I was designing record changers, and I ran into I had to make a part for the record changer,
Right.
and someone had told me that there was a place that could make castings
Okay.
by the Ross wax process. And I, as I said to him, the language wasn't quite as polite as I'm saying right now. What the hell is that? And he says, well, that's the way they make dentists make teeth, and they do lots of crazy things with it. So I said, is there any place around here that does it? No, but there are several of them in New York City. I said, in New York City, you got to be kidding me. No, he says, 43rd Street and 9th Avenue. I says, you're talking about 42nd Street, and you're talking about a foundry on 43rd Street? Not a retail business, but a foundry. And he says, yeah. So I went to see this place, and it was an investment casting plant. And
On 43rd Street.
on 43rd Street. I think I could still find the place today if the building hasn't been.
I mean, we
That
drive
was-
past that every day.
That was surprising.
It was
in,
right
in,
there.
in the 40s too.
Oh yeah, you know,
Okay.
what I'm trying to say is, if you got off in,
Well,
it
in
went
nine,
through
a couple
the,
blocks from Broadway.
if you went through,
It's right where
But
it's
Lincoln
right near the
Tunnel-
Port Authority. It's right
Yeah.
where the
Yeah,
Port
That's
Authority
where the
and
Port Authority is. That's where the
and
Port
the
Authority
Lincoln
is. That's where the
Tunnel.
Port Authority is.
one
Yeah.
block up and one block over from the Port Authority.
Now it's like the New York Times building or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
probably.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Right around there.
there's an investment casting plant there. And so at that time, as I said, I was working at General Instrument. I was absolutely fascinated with it. And
With what?
with the casting business.
Okay.
I saw it and what they could do, and the crazy part about it was that somehow or other, and I don't know who or what or how, someone said to me, there's even a plant in Hillside called Cooper Alloy. It was a sand foundry. They made big castings there, but they have an investment casting division.
What does it mean, a sand foundry?
A sand foundry is where you have a metal frame, let's say 3-4 inches deep. They come in all sizes, but let's assume it's something about this size, but about that deep. It's just a frame. And in one side of the frame, on the reverse side of it, you put half of the model that you want to make. In other words, suppose you wanted to make a glass. The glass would be here, and this frame would be around it, and you'd pour sand all the way around to take the shape. Then on the opposite side, you had to have a plug that went inside here so that you weren't making just a rectangular block of glass or metal or any other material. It was hollow.
Right.
And so this thing literally, if you were making it out of steel, would be wax. Then you put a can around it, stainless can around it, and poured in plaster all around the whole thing. But in order to get metal into this thing in here, you have to hook up what's called a gate or a riser. It's a column of metal, and it's attached to this thing at a couple of points, or whatever. In this case, it will always be the base, because that's the thickest point. And you put the can around it, packed in sand and a glue for the sand, and it hardened. And you put it in an oven.
So you made the shape by the sand making the impression, and then you had to do something to solidify the sand?
Yes, the sand was really a slurry composed of, there's a material called ethyl silicon, which is a material that looks like sand, and but it contains a glue, and the glue is a plaster material.
Right.
But it would withstand the temperature of the metal.
Right.
In other words, it could withstand or
So
remain.
this is sort of like inherently very similar to the lost wax method, really.
Yeah.
Similar idea. All right. So, Dad, let me just come back. So, you saw this foundry in Hillside, but I thought you met this guy through my mother or something.
That's correct, Sidney Brotman.
But was he the guy associated with the one in Hillside, or that's something different?
No, he was the one working for Cooper Alloy in Hillside.
So did you? Let me just understand, because you didn't mention my mother yet in this. Did you met her yet, or when did that all happen?
Well, I met this guy. Let's see, how did it work? I hate to think about it. It's complex. I was married to your mother already.
Okay.
And she had a friend who was the wife of the chemist that worked for Cooper Alloy.
Okay.
so we got to know him socially.
You were married. You were married in what? 47, 48.
Something like that. I
Yeah.
think it was 48, might have been 47. And I was introduced
So,
to him.
my mom knew Sidney Brotman's wife.
Correct.
She was friends with Sidney Brotman's wife through social work or whatever she was doing then.
Right. I don't know how they met.
Right.
They lived up near Dover.
Right. That's
but-
Dover, is in New Jersey.
Dover, New Jersey.
Yeah.
And at that time, probably the largest investment casting plant in the world was located there.
Okay.
It was a division of Union Carbide. Sidney worked for them, and he was a metallurgist, and his whole focus was metallurgy. I mean, in terms of making use of a brain, Sidney was like a one-track mind. He couldn't see anything but what he was making. We got into
So my
Yeah.
mother introduced you. You saw this plant,
right, and I
and
started up,
you saw this plant, and
decided to go into the business.
you
Gave up the job at General Instrument, and the family was just beside himself when I did that. I mean,
you
it was
had
a-
a family like your family or my mother's family or
No,
both.
my father, when I decided to go into the business, he says, "How much money do you need?" I don't know. I said, "A couple of $1,000s." He says, and he wrote a check out. He ultimately, I guess the ultimate thing was that I started this plant and I broke away from Sydney. And Sydney and I were signers of a note at the Hillside Bank. And my father says to me, "How much money do you need to get on a loan?" I says, "I need about $20,000, Pop." I said, "Well, I don't need it all in one shot." Well, he says, "Put it in the bank and it'll draw interest in the meantime. So you don't have to pay me anything." Anyway, my father gave me 20 grand, which I
Which
thought
in those
was
days was a little bit of money.
It was a couple of bucks in those days, especially if you could buy a brand new car for like $3,000. So
Your income at that point, you said, was about four.
4,000 or 5,000,
5,000.
yeah,
Just a
something.
few years ago.
Yeah. Anyway, Sydney was there for quite some time.
But you,
Dave-
let me come back to this because you told me some more details about this. You visited that plant. My mother knew the wife. You
Right.
visited. You were interested in this. You had become interested in the idea
Yeah,
before.
the price. Since I was working in journalism, I became interested in the process itself.
Right.
After visiting this place in New York City,
Right.
and then I found out that there were other places in New Jersey, and
And you visited a couple of them.
and I visited a couple, and I said, "This is for me." And
So you were starting to think about that.
oh yeah,
And then Hesse introduced you to
this guy,
what's his first name?
Sidney Brock.
Sidney Brotman. And you visited his plant. He owned it at that point.
No. He was working for Cooper Alloy.
Oh, he was still okay. He wasn't in his own business yet.
No, quite.
Okay,
the
I thought
we
I
met
thought he was,
socially.
you met
but-
socially.
Met socially when he didn't. I didn't invite him into the business until I'd already built a plant. Excuse me. On the second floor of all places, there was a foundry. I started in a leather casting plant.
But I'm
in
confused.
Newark.
I thought somehow he was in business himself, and you took over
No.
his business.
No.
The two of you went into business together.
No, I was in the business first. He was still working at the other place.
I
to
see.
Cooper
So he
Alloy.
was working for Cooper Alloy, and then you started your own business, and he came along with you initially, and you came into it?
No, he
Oh.
didn't.
I
We
thought you had to
actually-
buy him out or something.
I ultimately did. Initially, I had a plant, I forget the street, about a mile or two from downtown Newark, right near the Hensler Brewery. I can still see the street, probably find it today.
Can I
Then-
interrupt you just 1 second?
Sure.
Brianna, is the tape still on?
Yes.
Because there's a, like, it ends at a certain point. It only has like an hour in it, and have we gotten?
It's 54 minutes and 29 seconds.
So we may actually only have a few more minutes on this tape. We'll go as far as we can, and then we'll decide whether
When-
we're going to continue or not.
Okay.
So you decided. I mean, you
It's 60
basically
minutes,
decided
it's
that independently that you were gonna give up the whole job and you're gonna set out.
And go into the
Do you
investment
know that?
casting.
I mean, that was
I
big-
made
was
it.
big leap.
Jonathan, I just want to say, neither my father or mother ever discouraged me from going into something. In fact, they were pleased. Well, first of all, they were pleased that I had a job designing record changers. But then to think, what did I do?
No, I was
That
trying to do a
was-
thumbs up.
I'm
That is
encouraging.
I was
Brianna.
trying to do a thumbs up
Oh,
for the
okay.
camera. That's all.
What I was trying to get across is my parents encouraged me to start a business because they were
Well, they
had a store.
entrepreneur- they were entrepreneurial.
entrepreneurial.
You guys,
And
you
then
guys started.
there was nothing wrong with wanting to go into a business, and they thought it was fabulous that I found something that I liked, and I wanted to get into it deeper. And
You had a startup before. Before startups
well,
were startups.
in fact, when you go back in time, and I think I got the plaque in the cellar yet, I was one of 5 original members of the Investment Casting Institute, which now has maybe 100 members or something, some number like that. But the process was already in vogue for people making dental inlays. If you have a bridge in your mouth that's got metal in that, that's made by the lost wax process. The dentist takes an impression in your mouth in plaster, and of your teeth, and that makes one side of what he's doing, and he can, after he gets the plaster hard, he can mold wax on it for the shape that he wants. Not the actual clips itself.
This is slightly different in my concept because I somehow thought that Sidney Brotman
Right.
was somehow in business, and you joined him, and then he was doing things a certain way, and you saw that there was a better way to do it.
Well, that's quite true. Sidney Brotman, Cooper Alloy closed their investment casting plant.
Okay.
They were in the business,
Right.
and they continued to make product, but not investment casting.
Right.
And so Sidney, in fact, was let go by Cooper Alloy, and literally through his wife, we found my wife was Bessie. We got together socially.
Right.
And when he found out that what I was doing, he said, "Geez, I think I can help you out." And he did. accept that.
I'm gonna stop 1 second. Okay.
One more question relative to what we were talking before. You said your parents didn't discourage you, but by contradistinction, my mother's parents were very upset. She was upset. Isn't that true?
Oh, that's the reason that we're divorced. That, your what's the word?
My
Your
mother. My grandparents.
Your grandparents, not your grandfather, but I'm talking about
Griner.
Griner. I was in bed. There's a picture of me sitting like this in the folder I gave you. That was like it was in business like 2 years, Newark.
Right.
And that's, in fact, there's a picture on the wall of the new plant. But what I'm trying to say is that
It's going to end now. Goodbye. Goodbye.